Alright guys, I am back again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my Dragon Empire Shojodoji stealth deck. So this deck is another deck based on a unit from the Craycross epic web novel. And this deck revolves around units with stealth in their name, and getting those stealth units into your own bind zone in order to bind your opponent's units, as well as being able to superior call your stealth units from the bind zone in order to gain extra attacks. So as always, we will be going through the deck real fast, and then we'll show it off in one card fight. So starting first with the ride deck, we have our grade 0 starter, which is Can't Quit Sake Stealth Rogue Shojodoji, which is a great name. But it has the normal auto effect when it's rolled upon. If you 1 second draw a card, standard D-series starter, like always. Next for the grade 1, we have Sakura Romance Stealth Rogue Shojodoji. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 normal units with stealth and their card names from among them, reveal them, put one of the revealed cards into your soul, bind the remaining revealed cards, and shuffle your deck. So this ability lets you set up 1 stealth unit into your soul and 1 into your bind zone from the top 5, which the grade 3 Shojodoji needs stealth units in its soul in order to bind them for its cost, and then of course we can superior call stealth units from the bind zone as well. So this skill is just meant to help set up both of those skills for later. Now it is a top 5 check, so there is that RNG factor there. So it could whiff entirely, in which case you get nothing. Or if you just find 1 stealth unit to reveal, that one will go to the soul and you'll just get nothing in your bind zone. So your mileage may vary a little bit with this ability, but it is cost free. So it is still helpful to just help set up your combo pieces for later. And then he also has his activate ability when he's in the bind zone that says if you have a grade 1 or greater Vanguard with stealth in its card name, you can Soul Blast 1 and call this card to Rearguard Circle. So we're not running him in the main deck, but if you bind him out of your soul with the grade 3 Shojodoji's cost, then you can just have the option to call him right back to your board with a Soul Blast 1. So if you need that body on board, you do have that option to get one fairly easily. So can occasionally be a helpful skill. So next for the grade 2, we have World Shaper Stealth Rogue Shojodoji. So his auto ability says when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 normal units with stealth and their card names from among them, reveal them, put one of the revealed cards into your soul, and call the remaining revealed cards to Rearguard Circle and shuffle your deck. So a very similar skill to the grade 1 Shojodoji, except this one lets you put 1 to soul and 1 to Rearguard instead of to bind. So this skill can potentially be a free +1 onto your board, assuming you do find at least 2 stealth normal units in the top 5. So again, there is that RNG factor. You might whiff entirely, you might only find 1, in which case it does just go to your soul. But it is some potentially free card advantage, as well as some free resources, setting up your combo pieces where you need them as well. And again, he also has an activate ability when he's in the bind zone that says if you have a grade 2 or greater Vanguard with stealth in his card name, you can Soul Blast 1 and call this card to Rearguard Circle. So again, pretty much the exact same skill as the grade 1, where you can superior call him from your bind zone after you send him there from your soul if you need that body on board. So just another option for basically the same thing. So then lastly for the grade 3, we have Peak Personage Stealth Rogue Shojodoji. So he has an activate ability that says once per turn, you can bind 2 cards with stealth and their card names from soul, to choose 2 of your opponent's rearguard circles, bind all of the cards on the chosen rearguard circles, and your opponent puts those cards into their hand at the end of that turn. So the cost for this ability is binding 2 stealth units from your soul. So just from the ride line alone, you should be able to do this at least once without any extra assistance. And of course we have plenty of ways to get more stealth units into our soul. So that shouldn't be a problem paying that cost. And since you bind those stealth units, that sets them up in your bind zone to potentially superior call them later off his second skill, which I'll be going over in a second. But this ability does let you bind 2 of your opponent's rear guards. Now this is just a temporary -2 to your opponent, since they do get those cards back into their hand at the end of that turn. However, we do have some other cards in this deck that you can combo with this skill to get rid of those cards permanently. So we do have a way to turn this into a hard minus for your opponent. And the other nice thing about this ability is that it chooses the rearguard circles and not the units on that circle. So that means it can bypass any, can't be chosen skills that your opponent's rearguards might have. So a pretty cool ability that can also help set up for his second auto ability. That says, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, you can counterblast 1 and put 2 rearguards into soul. To choose a card with stealth in its card name from your bind zone, call it the rearguard circle, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, that called unit gets power plus 10,000 until end of turn. So this ability does give you your 4th attack every turn, letting you superior call a stealth unit from your bind zone to rearguard circle. Now this ability is technically a -1, since you have to suck 2 of your rearguards into your soul, and then you only get to call 1 back out. But we do have a few cards again that we can combo with this to turn it into a +/-0 as well. One of which can actually end up giving us a 5th attack that turn if you have the right setup too. So potentially up to a 5 attack deck. And since this cost does put those rearguards into soul, of course that sets up the cost for his activate ability for next turn as well. So it does potentially let you loop your units between your rearguard circle, your soul, and your bind zone. And if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, the unit you call off of him gets a nice 10k power boost as well. So overall, just a very cool ability, helping you set up your later combos as well as drastically increasing your offense. So that is the ride deck. Moving on to the main deck. First off, for the grade 3s. We of course have our 3 additional copies of the grade 3 Shojodoji for Persona Ride purposes, of course. And of course we have the double frame rare, looking very nice. Next up, we have 4 copies of Stealth Dragon Unprecedented. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle by a card's ability, if you have a Vanguard with Tamayura or Shojodoji in its card name, you can Soul Blast 1 and draw a card. So this card is the primary draw engine for the deck, letting you Soul Blast 1 to draw every time that you superior call him. Which, if you get lucky and find him in the top 5 and call him off of the grade 2 Shojodoji's skill, this ability will still go off. Of course, the primary way to get this is to call him from your bind zone off of the grade 3 Shojodoji's ability. And we also have a grade 1 that can superior call stuff in this deck as well. So we have a few different ways to potentially activate this ability. And then when he's on your rearguard circle, he also has this continuous skill that says if 2 or more of your cards were put from rearguard circle into your soul this turn, this unit gets power plus 10,000. So of course the grade 3 Shojodoji's on attack skill puts 2 of your rearguards into your soul, so that will fulfill his condition in order to gain this extra 10k. So as long as you attack with him after your Vanguard, he'll be at least a 23k base, 33k if you got Persona Ride that turn, and 43k if you got Persona Ride and you called him off of Shojodoji's ability and your opponent's at grade 3. So definitely a very powerful beat stick for this deck as well. So then the only other grade 3 we're running in the deck is 1 copy of the Regales piece, normal order, Gradius Greydal. So it is a Regales piece, so you can only have 1 of it in your deck and use it 1 time in a fight. And you can play it if you have a grade 3 Vanguard with Persona Ride and you did not ride this turn. and it just lets you activate Persona Ride. So this card isn't super necessary, I just had the space for it, so I decided to run it. It's another option to get that Persona Ride off, so helpful in just increasing your offense for that turn. So if you'd rather replace this with something else, you can, but I just had the space for it, so I decided to go for it. So that's all the grade 3s, moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we have 4 copies of Stealth Dragon Jakumetsu Arcs. So he has 2 auto abilities. The first one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle from bind zone, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So just a basic power-up ability when you call him from your bind zone. And then his second auto ability says when this unit attacks, you can Soul Blast 1 to choose a card from your opponent's bind zone and put it on the bottom of their deck. So this ability does help turn Shojodoji's first skill into a hard -1, since it lets you bottom deck one of the cards that you bound off of that ability. So that means your opponent won't be getting that card back into their hand at the end of the turn. So that's just an option to permanently get rid of one of those cards from your opponent. And it is a Soul Blast cost, but, you know, this deck is constantly refilling its own soul thanks to the cost of Shojodoji's on-attack skill. So being able to pay that cost shouldn't be too much of a problem. So a very nice combo card for this deck. So then the only other grade 2 we're running is 4 copies of Stealth Dragon Tsukuyodachi. So he also has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this card is put into soul from deck or rearguard circle during your turn, you can bind this card and soul charge 1. So if you find him off your ride line skills and put him into soul from your deck, or if you shove him into your soul to pay for grade 3 Shojodoji's cost, you can immediately just send him directly to the bind zone and soul charge 1. So you don't lose any soul counts off this ability, but it does potentially get him into your bind zone a little bit faster in order to trigger his second auto ability that's active in the bind zone. That says when 2 or more of your rearguards were put into soul at the same time during your turn, you can counterblast 1 and call this card to an open rearguard circle. So this ability does potentially allow you to get a 5th attack per turn when comboed with Shojodoji's skill, since paying Shojodoji's cost will trigger this ability by putting 2 of your rearguards into your soul. So what you want to do is you want to attack with your 2 front row rearguards first, and then shove both them into the soul for Shojodoji's cost. Superior call whoever you want from the bind zone with Shojodoji's skill, usually Unprecedented or Jakumetsu Arcs. And then if you have Tsukuyodachi in your bind zone as well, then you can go ahead and pay that counterblast and call him to the other open front row rearguard circle that you would then have. So that is the big main combo you want to go for with this deck as much as possible in order to get those 5 attacks. Now, one thing to note is that if you don't have a copy of this card in your bind zone, but you do have one on your rearguard circle, and you shove it into your soul to pay Shojodoji's cost, you have to fully resolve Shojodoji's skill before you can resolve his. So, by the time you would be able to get him into your bind zone, he would have missed his timing because he wouldn't have got to see the 2 rearguards going into your soul. So you won't be able to superior call him that turn. You will have to wait to the next one. So it's best to try to get at least 2 copies of this set up into your bind zone as quickly as possible, so you'll be able to call one of them every turn. But yeah, definitely one of the most important offensive cards in the deck. So that's all the grade 2s, moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 4 copies of Stealth Dragon Ride-On Kunai. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when your other rearguard is placed on rearguard circle from bind zone, you can bind this unit, and that unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. And if you did not countercharge this turn, you countercharge 1. So this card is the countercharge engine for the deck, helping you gain that resource back, which can be important since we got quite a few counterblast costs in this deck. He also lets you power up the unit that you call from the bind zone, which usually, since Shojodoji can power up the unit he calls himself, I usually like to resolve Tsukuyodachi's skill first if I have him in my bind zone, and call Tsukuyodachi, and then resolve the second instance of the skill triggering, which will be the rightmost one in your queue. And that will allow you to give that 5k power gain to Tsukuyodachi to let him hit some better numbers, which can be pretty important, since he's not going to be gaining any power when he calls himself off of his own skill. So giving that extra 5k to him will allow him to at least poke a Vanguard, or potentially hit over 1 damage trigger if you Persona Road that turn. So Tsukuyodachi is generally my main target for that power gain ability. Now, this skill is technically a -1 since you do have to bind this unit to activate it, but it's really not, thanks to his second auto ability that's active when he's in the bind zone. That says when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Shojodoji in its card name is attacked, you may call this card to Guardian Circle, and if you called a card, this unit gets shield plus 5,000 until the end of that battle. So he can actually superior call himself to the Guardian Circle and become a 10k shield if he's in your bind zone. So that first skill being technically a minus is more than made up for by the fact that you can still guard with him when he's in your bind zone. So that's actually better than him being on your board. Since he's a grade 1, he'd be sitting in your back row. You obviously wouldn't be able to intercept with him, and even if you had a way to do that, he would only be a 5k shield in that instance. So by getting him into your bind zone, not only does it allow you to use him as a defensive card as well, but it also increases that defense since you get the extra 5k shield power up. So overall, just a absolutely spectacular card for this deck. So next up, we got 3 copies of Stealth Fiend Koma Aun. So his auto ability says when this card is placed on rearguard circle from hand, you can counterblast one to choose a card from your opponent's bind zone, and you may put it on the bottom of their deck. And if you did not put a card, you choose up to 1 unit card with stealth in its card name and grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from your bind zone, and call it to rearguard circle. So this is a pretty versatile ability for this deck. It's either a counterblast one to -1 your opponent, or +1 you, since it is another option to get one of the cards you bound off of Shojodoji's skill to the bottom of their deck. So again, they won't get that back during the end phase. Or if they don't have anything in their bind zone, or you would just rather get a unit to yourself, since it says you can choose not to send one of their cards from bind zone to bottom of the deck, and instead just get that superior call from your own bind zone. So if you need help building a board, you do have that option, and of course this is a superior call, so that will trigger Unprecedented's skill as well to get you a draw if you call Unprecedented with this ability. So he can either help you or hurt your opponent, depending on what you need him to do at the moment. So just a very helpful card with some absolutely fantastic artwork. So next we got 3 copies of Stealth Fiend Forktail. So her auto ability says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you may look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and if you do, choose up to 1 normal unit with stealth in its card name or a glitter from among them, put it into your soul, and shuffle your deck. So this is just another way to get more stealth units into your soul, so it does increase your soul count, so you get an extra resource. It sets up those stealth units for you to bind to pay Shojodoji's cost, and potentially gets those units that you need into your bind zone as well. So just a helpful utility card for the deck. Again, it can potentially whiff, but it's a top 7 check, so the odds of that are pretty low. So the only other grade 1s we're running are our Sentinels. So first off, we have our 3 copies of Twin Buckler Dragon, just your standard perfect card. And of course the 1 copy of the Nationless Split Sorter Elementaria Sanctitude, which you can play without paying the cost if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive. So that's all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s, we just have our trigger lineup which is 7 crit, 4 draw, 4 heal, and 1 over. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have 4 copies of Burning Flail Dragon, crit with a skill. At the end of the battle it boosted, you can put into your soul to give one of your units plus 2k until end of turn. So just another soul gain option for the deck. Additionally, we have 3 copies of Blaze War Monk Sogyo. So just a vanilla crit. Next for the draws, we have 4 copies of Flare Veil Dragon. Draw with a skill. If your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, get shield plus 5,000. So you're a 10k shield, draw trigger. And then for the heals, we have 4 copies of Blaze Maiden Rayoni. So just the vanilla heal. Of course, if you want to run any of the effect heals, you can. And then our 1 over trigger is Dragon Deity King of Resurgence, Dragveda. So his additional effect lets you choose one of your Vanguards and stand it. So letting you restand your Vanguard in and of itself is strong enough of a skill, since it gives you an extra attack and an extra twin drive. But it's even worse in this deck since Shojodoji's on attack skill is not once per turn. So that means if you have the resources to pay it, you can potentially get up to 7 to 8 attacks if you check this at the right time and have the right things set up in your bind zone. So that's a big combo to pull off, and you probably won't get that most of the time. But it does give you at least a 5th or 6th attack without much trouble. So extremely powerful trigger. So that is the deck. So we will go ahead and have our 1 fight with it. And we'll fight Kana this time. And we'll be going first. Alright, so we'll discard that draw to ride. And grade 1 Shojodoji lets us check the top 5, and we find Jakumetsu Arcs as well as Sakuyo Dachi. So we'll put Sakuyo Dachi into our soul and bind Jakumetsu Arcs. But Sakuyo Dachi will be joining him because we can use his skill to bind him from the soul and soul charge. And we soul charge another Arcs. So then we'll just end our turn. And I'll let that one through. And I'll let that one through too. Once you get to crit trigger. But we get a crit as well. And a draw trigger on top of that. So our last trigger won't be able to hit us. Alright, so we'll discard Jakumetsu to ride. And again, grade 2 Shojodoji lets us check the top 5. And we find Sakuyo Dachi and a Persona Ride, so I'm actually only going to reveal 1 this time. So Sakuyo Dachi goes to Soul, once again triggers his ability. So he'll bind himself and let us soul charge again. And we soul charged another copy. Alright then. So he'll get bound as well, and we'll soul charge once more. And we soul charged another copy, wow. Okay, I don't know how that happened. Well, we got all our Shojodojis in the bind zone now, so that's a thing. Alrighty. Well, I finally got Forktail in there, so I guess I'll go ahead and call Forktail and use her ability. And we'll check the top 7. And this time, let's see, we'll go ahead and shove that Unprecedented in the soul as well. So we can get something in there that's not Shojodojin. So then I'll just go ahead and attack. And we get a heal trigger, which we very much needed. So we'll heal 1. And the power is wasted. And she gets a draw trigger. And Melty's skill will let her call 1 and draw 1. So she is rushing hard, so I think I'm going to block that one. And I'll let that one through. And I'll go ahead and guard that one as well. Alright, so we'll have to discard that crit to ride grade 3 Shojodoji. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and use Shojodoji's activate ability to bind 2 from our soul. So we'll bind Unprecedented and grade 2 Shojodoji. And now we can bind 2 of her rear guards, so we will get rid of Melty and Yulia. So then from our hand, we'll go ahead and call Koma Aun and use its skill to counterblast. And I could bottom deck one of those cards we just bound, but I'm actually not going to, and instead I'm going to Superior Call Unprecedented from the bind zone. So we'll put him right there. And since we Superior Called him, we can use his skill to Soul Blast one. And draw. So then we'll use the ability of the Grade 2 Shojodoji in our bind zone, so we will Soul Blast 1. And we can Superior Call him as well over here. And then we will call right on Kunai from our hand. And I think we are ready to go. So we will attack with... Let's see, we'll attack with Shojodoji first, boosted. She gets another draw trigger. So then we'll attack with Unprecedented, not boosted, and we'll have to attack into our rear guard. But then we can attack with Shojodoji. And we'll use his ability to counterblast and put 2 rear guards into Soul. So we're going to put Unprecedented and Shojodoji. And now we can superior call one from Bind. So we're going to call Jakumetsu Arcs. And let's see, we will put him right there. And we'll trigger his ability to gain an extra 5k. And I could call Sakuyo Dachi here, but she's already got a defensive trigger. So I would need a trigger for him to even be able to do anything. So I'm actually not going to use his ability, but instead I will use right on Kunai's to bind him and power up Arc some more, and then we can countercharge. And we get a heal trigger, which we do get. So we heal 1, and that power goes to Arcs. And then she gets a heal trigger, which she also gets. But Jakumetsu Arcs still has a chance of hitting. So we'll have him attack. And we can use his skill to Soul Blast 1. So let's see, we'll blast out the grade 1 Shojodoji. And now we can bottom deck a card from her bind zone. So we'll send Melty to the bottom, so she won't get Melty back as she guards. So now Shojodoji's skill will let her get Yulia back into her hand. And she's calling stuff over top of stuff, but she did not get her full field. So she is not going to be able to restand her Vanguard, so she's only getting 2 attacks this turn. And let's see, that's 23,000. I will let that one through. She gets another heal trigger when she also gets, wow. But we get a crit trigger. And we're not going to use right on Kunai, but we will guard that with that heal. Alright, so now we can Persona Ride. And let's see, we will go ahead and use Shojodoji's activate ability again. So we'll bind Unprecedented and Arcs this time. And we can bind 2 of our rear guards, so we'll nab both those Yulias. So then I'll go ahead and call Forktail and use her skill to check the top 7. And the only thing we find is our Persona Ride copy, which I don't necessarily want to put in there. So I think I'm actually not going to soul charge that. So we'll call right on Kunai again. And I think we're good to go. So we will attack with Forktail first, boosted by right on Kunai. So then we can attack with Jakumetsu, not boosted. But we will use his skill to Soul Blast one. And bottom deck one of those Yulias. And she guards again. So then we can attack with Shojodoji. And use his skill to counterblast and put Forktail and Arcs into the soul. And now we can call one from the bind zone, so we're going to call Unprecedented this time. And we will put him over here. And now we will resolve his ability to let us Soul Blast 1. And we'll get the draw. And now we can resolve Sakuyo Dachi's skill to counterblast again. And Superior call him from the bind zone. So we'll get our 5th attack. And we want to resolve the 2nd instance of Right on Kunai to bind him and give Sakuyo Dachi 5k. And we will get to counter charge. And we don't want to resolve those other Sakuyo Dachis. And then we get a crit trigger. So crit to the Vanguard and power to Sakuyo Dachi. So now Unprecedented can attack for 43,000. She lets that one through too. And she gets another draw trigger. So then we can attack with Sakuyo Dachi, boosted this time, for 43,000. And she lets that one through too. So now Shojodoji's skill does return that one Yulia to her hand. And she does get her Persona Ride. And Melty's skill will let her call and draw. And she did get her full field this time, so she will get her full 4 attacks. So I think I will use one of these right on Kunai skills to call it the Guardian Circle. And I'm not going to use the other one, but instead I will add that crit. And I'm not going to use right on Kunai, and instead I'm going to Perfect Guard that one. And we'll discard that draw. So she will get to restand Fortia, since she's got a full field of friends. And I'm gonna let this one through.
Vanguard にアタック。スキル発動。パワープラス。
And I think I'll let that one through too.
ダメージチェック。スキル発動。ターンエンド。スタンド&ドロー。
Alright, so now we can Persona Ride once again. So, let's see, she's got 9 cards in her hand, but she's at 5 damage. Let's see if we can bust through. We'll use Shojodoji's Activate ability first, so we'll bind 2 from our soul. So, Grade 2 and Jakumetsu. And we will bind Melty and Yulia. So then we'll call Koma Aun from our hand and use his skill to counterblast, and we'll bottom deck that Melty. And I think we're all ready to go. So we will attack with Sakuyo Dachi first. Not boosted. And then attack with Unprecedented, again not boosted. So then we'll attack with Shojodoji, boosted by Forktail. And his skill will let us counterblast 1. And put Unprecedented and Sakuyo Dachi to soul. And now we can Superior Call 1 from our bind zone. So I'm going to call Jakumetsu Arcs. And we'll put him there. And he gains 10k since she's at grade 3. So then Arc's ability will also give himself an extra 5k on top of that. And then we can use Sakuyo Dachi's skill to bind himself from the soul and soul charge. And then we can use the Sakuyo Dachi in our bind zone to counterblast 1 and Superior Call another copy for our full 5 attack combo, as she perfect guards our Vanguard attack. And we get a heal trigger, which we do get, so we will heal 1. And we will give that power to Sakuyo Dachi. So now Jakumetsu Arcs will attack, boosted this time, for 43,000. And we can use his skill to Soul Blast 1. And we'll bottom deck that Yulia. And she perfect guards again. She's only got 2 cards left in her hand Let's see if she'll be able to block it. We'll attack with Shotcut, boosted by Komaun for 38,000. Oh, and she had another perfect guard.
発動完全ガード
And she doesn't have to discard this time. Wow, she just barely survived that.
スキル発動
So Shojodoji's skill would put the Bind Zone cards back to her hand, but we bottom decked both of them.
ペルソナライド
So she gets nothing back, but she does get her Persona Ride.
ヴァンガードにアタック
But she can't fill up her field, so she's only getting 2 attacks. So I'm not going to use Ride on Kunai, and I'm just going to perfect guard that.
スキル発動
And we'll drop Unprecedented.
完全ガードドライブチェックヒールトリガー
She gets a heal trigger when she does get.
パワープラスドライブチェックヴァンガードにアタックスキル発動パワープラス
And I'm going to let that one
ノ
through.
ーガードダメージチェックターンエンド私のターンドロー
Alright, so we should be able to get her this time. I'm dangerously close to decking out, though. But we will go ahead and use Shojodoji's Activate ability once again to bind the last 2 cards in her soul.
この勝負私に分がありそうねスキル発動バインド
And we will take out Melty and Yulia once again. So then we can just go ahead and attack. And we're going to attack with Arcs first, boosted.
ヴァンガードにアタックガード
And she guards. So then attack with Sakuyodachi, boosted.
ヴァンガードにアタックノーガード
She lets that one
ダメー
through.
ジチェック
So now we'll attack with Shojodoji,
ヴァンガードに
boosted by
アタック
Forktail. And his skill lets us counterblast. And put our front row
スキル発動
into the soul. And now we can superior call 1 from our bind zone, so I am going to call Unprecedented.
スペリオルコールパワープラス
And now we'll resolve one of these Sakuyodachis from our bind zone
スキル発動
to call him as well.
スペリオルコール
And I could resolve both those skills, but I'm so close to decking out, I'm actually not going to use either one of them.
ガード
Oh, she's going to guard with her over trigger.
ドライブチェックオーバートリガー
Oh, but we got our over trigger! So I am going to give that power to... You know what? I'm giving it to Sakuyodachi.
パワープラス
This attack won't go through, but we'll restand our Vanguard anyway. So I will attack with Unprecedented,
ヴァンガードにアタックノーガード
and she's got to let that one through.
ダメージチェック
And we finally got her with that one.
私の勝ちね
With just 3 cards left in my deck. So there you go. That was my Shojodoji stealth deck. With a hell of a fight for this video. But anyway, I'll be back soon with more deck profiles. Next up, I will be doing another variant of the stealth deck based around the standalone promo boss, Megalo no Zuchi. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.